Just finishing Judges and just seeing where we left off and coming into chapter essentially 13, where Samson comes into play. And this is really like the judge that we, always hear about. I mean, we hear about Deborah, we hear about Barak, but like, and even Gideon, but Samson is like the one, right? And I thought it was just pretty amazing how I read in I believe it's Tony Evans' commentary. He said, despite Samson, his falling short and the things that happened, he um he was the one that God chose to deliver them,
Hmm.
yet the people that he was sent to deliver actually delivered him to the enemy. And it was just like, I never really looked at Samson as a type of Christ in that way. But how much of a connection that is to see the same people that he was sent to deliver delivered him over to the Philistines, to the enemy. And so, of course, we know that Jesus was delivered over from his own people, and to see that. And so it was just interesting and to see all of this just disarray that's going on throughout just the entire book, and for it to just to carry on. Samson was the last judge, but then even after him, we got into seeing just some I guess corruption, if you will, amongst like the Levites and in people's homes and the tribes. It talked about this guy Micah who wasn't even a Levite, but he was kind of acting like he was, where he had his own little worships thing going on and he was creating stuff. And basically, it just reminded me of the golden calf in Exodus 32. Here's this time again where they're just worshiping idols. They're just, like I said, people left to their own vices, and they're going to do whatever they want to do. And so that's kind of what we saw in chapter 17 and 18, just this corruption that's taking place that continued on in the rest of the few chapters where even in chapter 19 there was a similar situation that was like Genesis 19 where in Sodom and Gomorrah and Lot was confronted and they're saying, hey, we want these people, they're going to do all these immoral things. And we kind of get this same story again. So we're seeing like how history continues to repeat itself, whether if it is the disobedience from the Israelites and even down to the type of way that things are happening, or even things from the world who are coming in trying to take over God's people. And so Judges is just it's a really interesting book to see the roller coaster that it is. I think for the most part, up until now, we've always kind of seen just this, it's down. Like it's Job, it's Exodus, it's Numbers, and then it's up. It's Joshua. Like it's either one or the other. And even though Joshua had wars and different things, it's still this level of like there was this victory here. And then in Judges, we're seeing this like, well, they was in bondage for 20 years, but then they was free for 40 years. And it's just like this back and forth that keeps happening over the course of about 300 years. And so to see as they're continuously trying to gain this territory, claim this land, but they're intermingling with the people that God told them to not intermingle with. And he let them know, like, hey, this is not going to be to your benefit. It's not going to help you as the people that I've created you to be. But whatever reason, it's our nature. We just continue to fall and we do what is right in our own eyes. And that's just kind of what it was. And that's what happened with Samuel. There's three accounts where there's these women that he is being associated with. And the first one, he was like, hey, that one over there, like I want that one. And then like a little kid, he goes and tells his parents, like, hey, go get her for me. Like that's the one that I want. And that just continues to be his demise ultimately with Delilah, where now, tells a secret, cuts his hair, falls victim to it. And something else that I was reading was I never looked at this in this way when Samson's hair grew back, how this is this kind of symbol of redemption for him, or even a renewed faith, where God is saying, "Hey, I'm gonna let you." I've called you to do this work for me, and I mean, he's like I said, he falls short, but it shows that God still loves us enough to want to save us, and he wants us to be close to him. And that picture of his hair growing back to gain his strength back to tear down and to ultimately win this battle is just an example of God's faithfulness, his love, his grace, his mercy. And so I think that that's something that in the story of Samson specifically that I think we can all look at, and even the perspective from um like from the women, right? Like always like trying to look at it from like what's the other perspective in this that's going on here? Whenever we see different characters, like how are we looking at this from another point of view? The prime example I think of is, and I know this is kind of outside of Judges, but the prodigal son story, where the emphasis is so much on the son that left, but we need to give the same emphasis to the son that stayed because he's just as lost as the one that left. And you have to look at it from, well, what does that lens look like too? And so yeah, so Judges was I don't know, it was an interesting book. Even though it was 21 chapters, I feel like it just seemed like we kind of went through it quicker than some of the other ones. Even though they might have been, fairly long. But it was just a lot of just up and down throughout the entire time. So with that, I mean, I kind of might have a couple other things, but do you guys have from Judges specifically, not into Ruth just yet, but in Judges specifically that you just kind of noticed that kind of stuck out to you? You maybe want to dig into a little bit deeper on. What did you all see in the rest of these chapters from 13 to 21?
Like you said, Pastor Eric, Samson was set aside for God's use, but he took that calling for granted. He didn't take it seriously. And I was amazed, or just hearing for the first time, or understanding for the first time when Tara Lee broke it down, said that when he was captured and he gave a secret away, he was humbled by that experience, and coming out of that he called God what, Elohim, which was a generic term for God. And then she said that he called him Yahweh at the end, and he gave his life. And he said he killed more Philistines in that moment than he did his entire lifetime.
Mm.
I thought that was
When he
interesting.
when he recognized him as Yahweh, you're
When
saying,
he
right? Yeah,
recognized God as Yahweh, and
that's good.
that was surprising to me, or an aha for me.
Mm-hmm. And I think that with you saying that, Ms. Drake, I think one thing that we take, I mean, clearly we still have a ways to go this year, but I think that next year, something to not just like in a group Bible study, but just for each of us on our own, to go back and pick some of these books and to take that deeper dive because we are covering a lot of material. We clearly we're not able to go always as deep as we would like to on things because it
Right.
is a lot of stuff. I think that what we're doing is great, but of course, like you're saying, like to get into like a word study where let me really look at all of the names of the people. What do those names mean? Like Samson's name, it means like the sun, like sun. But to know that he was sent as a deliverer of these people, he's like the son Jesus as well. And so his name has meaning. And so I think to look into some more of those things
Right.
and how that really looking at some of like Tara Lee, she gives like links to charts and graphs and things like that. Like looking at a map to understand what does this even region look like as you're sharing different things in the story to fully grasp, what that is. Like to know that, Moab is east of Judah, but it's across the Dead Sea. So essentially, like when I was looking at Ruth, like they had to go like around. They couldn't just go straight over there. They had to go around. And so, wow, like, well, how long is that journey?
It's
And
outside.
and what did that look like? So I think that that's where I would just encourage each of you when we get into next year to really start to take, and you maybe you're doing it now, but just really like, you know what, this year I'm gonna take at least one book and I'm gonna like just spend more time in it and really see what comes from it. And I think that'll just be a real beautiful thing.
What was going on in his mind where every time he told Delilah what the secret could have been,
Mhm.
and and she had called the Philistine army to capture him. What was going through his mind when he kept telling her that? I just it just goes to show, I guess, how blind we can be when we're in sin, how lost we can be, what our mindsets are like. It just baffles me.
Yeah. And he kept
Yeah, I was
saying,
thinking the same thing. Like, like, is he not realizing? Like, the first time I got it, you didn't think you was just sharing, but he was smart, right? Because he lied to her. But then I feel like he kind of became arrogant and
mm,
was like, they tried it, it failed. Then when he tell him something else, they tried it, it failed. And so I think it seems as though he got like a little arrogant. But it was just interesting that he knew he was being set up and continued,
mm-hmm.
to tell her
Well,
anyway.
well, he was not in touch with God. I mean, he just had been accustomed to just being strong, and he forgot his source.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Tanil, when you say like him being arrogant, I saw it was in 14, I think it was in chapter 15, but it says that he defeated the Philistines with the jawbone of a donkey. You know what I'm saying? Or he tied up like 300 foxes and stuff like that. Like stuff where
Right.
it's just like I'm thinking about uh what's the movie? It's the little girl Mirabelle. Where they have like the doors that she has to open up. It's like a kids movie where you have to open up the doors and that's where they get their gift and stuff like that. I forgot what it's called right now. But it's just like there's just this magicness that just happens and it's just like where is all this coming from? And for him like to defeat like with a donkey, like it's just like the things that he's just doing is just like crazy. And like that has to come from somewhere. Like where is this power that is just coming from that you just can't have on your own? And it's just like you're just given this gift. Like you just have to possess this gift, and it doesn't always get used in the way that it needs to, but God is going to use it in the way that He wants to use it. And that's really what we see with Samson. Like God is going to do what He's going to do, no matter what, despite our faults, despite our shortcomings, and our fleshly desires. He's gonna get it done.
Yeah, one of the things that Tara Lee always encourages us to do is to look at the character of God because
Hmm.
we can kind of get caught up in the stories because they're so good. But
Hmm. Hmm.
I do always try to reflect back, and it's just a common theme that I'm starting to see over all the chapters, and that humans constantly make mistakes, and which is why we're reminded daily that there are distractions that are around us. But he
Hmm.
wants us to keep his eyes on him no matter what the circumstance is, whether it is truthful, that you don't have anything sitting before you to eat, you still have to know that he will provide. Like,
Hmm.
and so we're human, we're going to fall short of his glory. We're not perfect, but also that he always has a way to redeem us. And then when we cry out to him, he saves us. That doesn't mean you don't go without punishment,
Hmm.
but it's just like this common theme of the same God, different story.
Yeah.
And so that's displayed in Judges as well when he gets well, I don't know if my assumption is that he becomes arrogant, but he makes the mistake, tells the woman the secret, goes into uh jail, slavery, I don't know what you want to call it, but he cries out to God and then he saves them again. But his punishment is that he dies, or his the outcome, but he still um blesses him even in the midst of it all. And so I don't
Hmm.
know. Yeah.
A question that has kind of plagued me for a while is he told Delilah, my hair has never been cut
Hmm.
because I've been a Nazarite, to God from my mother's womb.
Hmm.
If I'm shaved, my strength will leave me, and I will become as weak as any other man. And the question I've always grappled with is, did he actually believe that?
Hmm.
Because in the other cases, he gave him this little foo-foo thing and nothing happened. He still had his strength. And he understood what it, well, I think he understood what it meant because he said, if you shave my head, my strength leaves and I become like anybody else. But when he told her that, I just wondered, did he actually believe that there was power in that simple act that connected him to the awesomeness of
Yeah.
God? I don't know. I think it's
You
one of
know,
those questions that I'll have to live with forever
yeah.
and ever.
That's good, Mr. Drake, because it talks about, there was I think when it was like the story with the lion and stuff, but it
Hmm.
mentioned that time where there was a feast. And like during the feast, there would be wine and different things like that. And so I think one can almost infer up until this point, what you're talking about in 16,
Hmm.
that
Yeah.
even though he has the Nazarite vow on him from when he was even before he was born,
Yeah.
he's engaged in things that are go against the Nazarite vow. He even touched a dead animal, right? And so the last thing that was really associated was the cutting of his hair. And
Yeah.
so here we are, the very last thing that it seems like he hasn't tiptoed into that water just yet and cutting his hair. Because that's what he said. He doesn't, he said, so I told her that all was in his heart and said to her, a razor has never come on my head, for I am a Nazarite to God. He didn't say anything about like I've never drank anything, I've never done this, I've never done that. He just said that a razor hasn't come to my head. He zeroed in on the one thing that has been consistent with him throughout all of this time. And now it's almost like you're saying, like, he's like, I'm gonna push the envelope.
Yeah.
Like, you know what? I've done all these other things and I've still had this strength. I've still been conquering. So yeah, go ahead. Let's see if you do cut my hair, if something's gonna happen. I know what the Nazarite vow is and what I've been told, but
Yeah.
let's just see if it happens. And then, it gets the best of them.
Hmm. Hmm. I had a fellow who stole 1/3 of our income from our nonprofit organization. And he stole it over a period of a year because we're all saved, we're all sanctified, we're all filled with the Holy Ghost. And so we trust each other, and we didn't have good controls in place.
Mm-hmm.
And the fellow was going to the bottom of the box to write checks to himself. And I would imagine that we eventually caught him, but I would imagine that along the way, God told him to stop it, knock it off. Stop it, knock it off. And he didn't adhere to God's warning.
Mm-hmm.
So God had to pull the cover off. And so we busted him.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And so I would imagine that along the way, perhaps God was saying, Samson, but he kept doing this thing. So finally, he gets to this place where he cuts his hair off. And that's kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back,
Yeah.
because he ended up being conquered, enslaved, if you will, incarcerated, right? And because of God's grace and because of what God wanted to accomplish. And that's what keep hitting me over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
God's will be accomplished, even though we don't always cooperate. God's going to make it happen somehow. So his hair grows back, and God uses him to, do his thing with the Philistines. I just wonder if along the way God said, "Knock it off, Samson." Hmm.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
I mean, I feel like Judges is, like I said, it's just this roller coaster, kind of the same thing over and over. Are there any last things as far as, I mean, we kind of see there's this civil war that kind of takes place, what is it? Benjamin is,
Mhm.
kind of lashing out a little bit. And it's just, it's almost like a civil war is literally people against themselves taking themselves out. That's why like civil wars are so
Yeah.
so dangerous. It's one thing you have like a world war, which is still dangerous, clearly. But like when you have people who are going after each other, like it's almost like I'm gonna tear you down. So then the real enemy hasn't doesn't like Satan doesn't need to do anything at this point because y'all just gonna take each other out. And and that's just like that's a huge event. I mean, I feel like this is really the first time that we're seeing this. It's always been the Israelites have, I mean, they have been going against other nations and they have even gone against God essentially, but throughout it, it seems as if they tried to stick together at least. And now they have their inheritance, or trying to get all of their own things. It's just like, are all of these people, we talk about Samson, but are all these people just kind of getting beside themselves where it's just like, well, hey, we're gonna do what's right in our own eyes. We got the land, we got what we've been hoping for all this time. We got what our ancestors have been wanting for us all this time, and now we got it, and we just gonna act however we want to act. And I mean, I think that's just a telling of even how we can be today, just for those who came before us, and we do
Mm,
whatever we want to do because it's ours. It's a standard. Like this is what it's supposed to be. And if I don't have that, then I want yours, or I need more than what I got.
mm,
And it's just like a vicious cycle.
yeah. Vicious cycle was right.
Well, I mean, if anybody has anything else from Judges, I mean, feel free to chime in. But we get into the book of Ruth. Ruth is only 4 chapters, but Ruth is really one of my favorite books just because of like the sim one. I'm always a fan when I see women winning in the Bible. I'm just gonna put that out there. And in this situation, like it's literally maybe the biggest win we got. Like it's it's a huge win. And so essentially Ruth, you see it's a short book, but you see these themes of like loyalty, providence, grace, love, redemption, kindness. I know Tennille, she's got a kindness nonprofit, so like kindness is all throughout here. And I think once again, it's kind of like even though the first chapter is a little rocky, it kind of gives us this uplifting moment again. Ruth is actually during the period of Judges. In I know it mentions it in I think in in verse 1, it says, "Now in the days when the judges governed." So it's during the period of Judges. Um, and so it's walking about this family who it mentions there was this famine that was in the land. So Elimelech takes his family. They're going to go to Moab to sojourn to find refuge, essentially. And so they go. And so basically they're leaving God's place. And they're like, we're gonna go do this. He goes with his wife Naomi and their 2 sons. He ends up passing away. His sons get married to Moabite women, which that seems to be a recurring theme throughout the Bible. We've heard about so many nations, but something about these Moabite women seem to win over any other nation when it comes to relationship. And so they marry these 2 women. Of course, Naomi is grieving this situation, and so she's like, "Well, I got word that things are good back at home, so I'm gonna go back home. Y'all go ahead and stay here with y'all families, and I'm gonna go back home." And but Ruth is like, "No, you my family now. The 2 became one, and so I'm with you, and so your God is my God." And a lot of people will talk about how like this is kind of like a wedding text in 16 and 17, "Do not urge me to leave or to turn back from following you, for where you go I will go, where you lodge I will lodge, your people shall be my people, your God my God, where you die I will die, and there I will be buried. Thus," this is a amazing statement, "thus may the Lord do to me and worse, if anything but death parts you and me." Like that's to death do us part. Like if something separates us, it allow it to be even worse than anything that it could be outside of death. And that's what she's saying. And so they go back to Judah. Ruth comes with her. And as we see in chapter 2, and then going in even in the rest of the book, that Ruth just has this immeasurable favor on her because she has converted, she has accepted the Lord. She's also accepted this people as her new family. And she has just, I mean, Boaz tells her, like, "I've heard some good things about you. Like, I've got reports about you." And so that goes into chapter 2 where she is basically just kind of serving Naomi in that she's picking grain from in the areas. And at this time it was saying that poor people were allowed to pick grains from the corners of the fields. Like it was like a law that they would have to do that. And so of course Naomi being without a husband, she would be considered poor. Like she doesn't really have much. And so Ruth was being a good daughter and going out for her, and that's where her and Boaz met. I even like in verses I think it was around verse 7. Um let's see. Uh there was a part where basically they had a date, is what I call it. They had like a lunch date where they were like working and then they just kind of took a moment to kind of come together. And so, and then she kind of, oh, at verse 14, at mealtime, Boaz said to her, "Come here, that you may eat of the bread and dip your piece of bread in the vinegar." So she sat beside the reapers, and he served her roasted grain, and she ate and was satisfied and had some left. But then she rose and went to get picking again. So this was like a lunch date, is what I kind of see it as. Like he sat down, they first had this, continued to have exchange. She goes home to Naomi, and says like, "Hey, I met this guy named Boaz," and Naomi is like, "Oh yeah, like that's the fam, like he one of us, like, he's a wealthy guy." So that leads into Naomi saying, "Hey, it's like the Cinderella story, like, hey, you need to go get your man, okay? This is the one that is going to redeem the family again. You need to go get this guy. He's the one." So we get the story of her going into, there's a moment where he kind of becomes a watchman during the event. Naomi comes in there, they have an exchange. She leaves the next day. Once again, he shows her favor again by giving her some more grain to go home with. And then chapter 4 is where he's basically is like, okay, let me go ahead and make this solidified so that we can get married to redeem not only Ruth, but Naomi. You're really now redeeming this family for their inheritance. And so he's not the next in line because the law says that your brother is next in line to marry in the event that you were to die. Well, the guy that was next in line wasn't even Elimelech's brother. They're just related, and neither is Boaz. So that means that they didn't even technically have to do this, but because they wanted to make sure that it stayed within the family, they were willing to do it. The guy says, "Hey, I'll get the land," but Boaz is like, you got to take the lady that came with it too, right? And he was like, I can't do that. I can't do that." So he lets Boaz have it. And something that I read was very interesting when it says that the man removed his sandal and gave it to another, and that was the manner of attestation in Israel. And so it was saying this sandal of giving over, it represents how you walk on sandals on the ground. So by giving this sandal over is saying that I am giving you the ground. I'm giving you the land or the soil that it would tread on. It like that's the representation. And so it wasn't a law, it was just a tradition that came about. And when I saw it, I was like, well, really, what is that? What is that? And it's just saying that it represents that the ground is now being passed over to him. And this is in like a little court setting, right? So Boaz set things up. When it says that chapter 4, now Boaz went up to the gate and sat down there, and behold, the close relatives of whom Boaz spoke was passing by, and he called 10 men of the elders. So he kind of created like this little court system right here. Like we're gonna have some witnesses, and we're gonna make sure that this is done the right way. And ultimately, Boaz gets the land. Him and Ruth get married, and to me, it is in verse I think it's verse 10. "Moreover, I have acquired Ruth the Moabitess, the widow of Mahlon, to be my wife in order to raise up the name of the deceased on his inheritance, so that the name of the deceased will not be cut off from his brothers or from the court of his birthplace. You are witnesses today." And to me, that's just a pivotal verse. Like that is the redemption fully taking place. Ultimately, they get married, have a child. This child is Obed, Obed, which is the grandfather of David. He's the father of Jesse, and so that is where this what Boaz is called the kinsman redeemer. He's a kinsman because he's family, but he's also the redeemer because he's redeeming not just the land, but he's redeeming the people. He's redeeming the family, and he's redeeming all of Israel because this is where the line of David will now come, and ultimately Jesus will come from it as well. And so Ruth is essentially the kind of the four areas that I saw was chapter 1 was a lot about like disappointment, suffering, discouragement. Chapter 2 was more about like service, favor. Chapter 3 kind of got into hope. And then chapter 4 was about redemption. And like when I look at this, like I'm just like, this whole book is the gospel. Like I'm looking at like we have like suffering because of things that we've done and how we have sinned. And now we are essentially, when we get saved, when we go back home like they did, we now are serving or being fruitful in those things, and we have hope in it as well as we continue to seek out God. And in that hope, ultimately we get redeemed. And so when I look at, that's why I think Ruth is just so impactful. Because when you first see it, it's wedged in between Judges and First Samuel, and you're kind of just like, it's these 4 chapters, and it almost seems like they just threw it in here. But that's not by any means. It's very much this hinge that sets up everything going forward that we will see when we see more about David and Samuel and in Kings. So that's pretty much like Ruth, in a nutshell, is just that it's the gospel message. It's about just leaving God, coming back to him, having hope in him, and also being redeemed by him. And I think that we have a lot of characteristics that are things that we strive for. And I think that's why chapter 1 has been an example of things used in wedding ceremonies because of impact and its significance there. So that's Ruth. Do you guys have so what have you guys kind of gotten from just this short book but very impactful book? What are some things that you guys have kind of gleaned from the book of Ruth?
I love the book of Ruth. I love all the characters in the book of Ruth. Most everybody always talks about Ruth, but I always think about Naomi and putting myself in Naomi's shoes, how disappointed she must have been to leave her hometown and to be in the area in Jerusalem, in Bethlehem, where everybody was doing what was right in their own eyes, and how, they went to Moab, and Moab was a heathen nation. And then, her husband dies there, that her son, both of her sons die. How are they going to take care of themselves? But it's as if God sent Naomi to Moab to scoop up Ruth, because Ruth was going to be a part of the story.
Mm-hmm.
And so you had that mentoring relationship there. And yes, Naomi was bitter, disappointed, because how was God gonna redeem her? How were they gonna survive? And even in her bitter state, she was urging her daughters-in-law to go back to their heathen nation, uh, not good mentoring, with the chosen, being the chosen of God. But there's redemption all through it for each character. So I really, really love that. And then I did not know that Boaz's mother was Rahab. That's what Tara Lee said. So I need to do some research. Is that true?
I think I might have missed that part too. But I mean, that'd be very, very
That's what
interesting.
she said. So I'm like, I need to go back and look into that.
Yeah, it
That
mentions
Yeah, she said it.
I know it mentions his father
uh-huh.
in verse 21. But as far as for the mother, I mean, I don't know where else,
Did
because
you
I know
hear that
Boaz is,
too,
I know his
Artan? Go ahead.
I did.
Uh-huh.
I did.
And I thought it was beautiful because um Boaz had respect for his mother, being a prostitute, but yet giving up all of her culture to embrace God. And that's exactly what Ruth had done. And he was impressed by Ruth. I was just those little details were such a blessing to me.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned Naomi, in chapter 4, verse 16, then Naomi took the child and laid him on her lap and became his nurse. And the neighboring women called him, a son is born to Naomi. Like, here's this time where she's lost a husband and 2 sons, and yet here is this grandchild, yet he's recognized as a son has been born to Naomi. There's this restoration that's taking place, even for her to be a nurse, where it's like, man, I couldn't care for my family before because they all died. And now here I am caring for this new life that's here that is pivotal for the history that's going to come. Not that she knew that at the time, but just like that was the way that it played out. And so even in verse 14, then the women said to Naomi, blessed is the Lord who has not left you without a redeemer today, and may his name become famous in Israel. I mean, how great is that these women said, you were redeemed? Like you're saying, Ms. Rick, like we
Yeah.
talk about Ruth being redeemed in this story, but like it's Naomi is redeemed. Ruth is redeemed. Naomi is redeemed. The land is redeemed. And like I said, Israel is redeemed. There's so much about redemption in the book.
Right.
And we can't forget that she's a part of that too.
I was where sons are revered, in this Jewish culture, for them to say about Ruth that she was better to Naomi than 7 sons. That was very powerful in a culture where women weren't, they weren't valued in that culture. But for them to recognize and say Ruth was better to Naomi than 7 sons. That was pretty powerful.
Yeah, that was definitely a strong statement. It just spoke to the favor that God had given her. And so one of the things that I really enjoyed reading this is Mr. Boaz. I mean, like, I felt he was just like a knight in shining armor. Like he just was so focused on Ruth. And I I mean, like, I don't know, I'm at a loss for words, which is rare. But like he was just like, who is this woman? So first of all, he recognized her.
Right.
And then he wanted to take her in and make sure she was taken care of. Like, here, you can come graze over here. You can get some of this. Like, y'all bring some more stuff out so she can get some more. And then he was like, and oh, we're not sending her away empty handed. Like, here, pal this on, give her some more. And it was just like he was just going out of his way to make her feel seen, comfortable, and welcomed. And then knowing that he was doing it because of her character.
He also
And
had the community to
yes,
join in and give her favor and say, do not harm her no matter
right,
what. And when it was Naomi, when she said, if you were to go amongst any other land, if you were to
right,
go
you wouldn't
anywhere
be
else,
safe.
you would
Yep,
not be safe.
yep,
That protection, that covenant that was over her, just from this man seeing how well she treated someone else and what she gave of herself.
right, right. And that's what I was telling James. I was like, he wanted to protect her, he wanted to provide for her, and he even prayed for her. He was like, Lord bless, bless you. And I was
Yeah.
just like, oh my God, like this Mr. Boaz. Look, we need to be talking about him to these women. Like, you need to
Look, Danielle, my
be
mom
praying
always
for
says, she like,
Boaz.
my mom is always like, I gotta get me a Boaz. She says this all the time.
And
And
that's
then,
funny
it's like,
because now I see that in such a different way. Like, how, yeah, of course, our parents and everyone, women would say that. And then even when they speak of Ruth and you think of how she gave herself, it's just a total, no matter how many times you heard the story, for some reason, this has hit me a little bit different to see and to hear it again. I'm going back to my application Bible, reading more, trying to see, like, let me see more about this. So yeah, I'm gonna read this again.
yeah, it's definitely encouraging.
Yeah. And Brennan just put in there, I was just looking it up, but Brennan put in the chat already that Matthew 1:5 is where it connects. When it goes to the genealogy in Matthew, it says that Solomon had Boaz by Rahab, and then and it goes through the continuing and so I think it's one of those inferences that this Rahab is the same Rahab in Jericho that helped him to get through. I think it's one of those things where it could be another Rahab, but I think for the most part, it probably is the same one. Them genealogies, man, they come in. Oh,
Yeah, I'm thankful that he pointed that out Matthew as well, because I was trying to look that up and I hadn't found it yet. So thank you for sharing that. As I think about this, man, a couple things hit my brain. One is the favor that God shows people when they are faithful and loyal. That's pretty powerful to me. But then also he took this Moabite woman and grafted her into his plan for redemption. She's an outsider. And if we aren't careful, we tend to think that only a certain select group of people will be a part of God's story. But God knows how he wants the story to go. And so when he takes his Moabite woman, connects her to Boaz, connects her, and they have this child that becomes the father of Jesse, who becomes the father of David. And we know Jesus comes from his lineage. Just like, wow. God, I mean, he did the same with Rahab as well. She got included, right? And now we see it happening again. And the epistles talk to us about how we were grafted into God's plan because we weren't Jewish. But he allows some things to happen to give us time to be brought into alignment with his plan. And that's pretty powerful. That spoke to me pretty dramatically, how God grafts us into his story, man.
And it goes to what you're saying, Mr. Drake, just about like Gentile, right? She's a Gentile woman. And you know, when you look in the book of Acts, of course you have you know, when they get saved in 2, but when you get further on, I think it's like in Acts chapter 10, that's Gentile Pentecost. You know what I'm saying? Like it's still being grafted in here. And so here we have a time where there's a heavy emphasis on the Gentile component with God's chosen people at the time who were Jews. And it's this redeeming of all nations is what's
All
going on.
nations.
You know, it's redeeming of all nations.
Which takes us back to his beginning, his plan at the very beginning.
Yeah.
Wow,
So
wow.
I think that goes to really point out that how, you know, when we think about Israel being chosen, right? Like this was people that God said, okay, from Abraham, you're going to come this, and then Jacob, now you're Israel, and this is where these people come from. It's not about this plan that God is like, I only want these, like you said, these select people, and that's it. I'm just using a select group of people to show myself in the world. That's what it's about. It's not about saving only one group of people. It's about using a group of people and how God wants to show the world how he is saving all people.
Amen to that. Amen to that. Well, I almost got a little excited. I thought, woo, I was gonna get the Holy Ghost up here in my little office. Start shouting over here. Yeah, start shouting. Right. Thank God that he grafted us in, pulled us in.
So I think I might have said this before, but I am preaching through Ruth in May. The first Sunday we're having it's the message is going to be on Gen Alpha, but then after that, starting Mother's Day, we're going to go through Ruth for 4 weeks and go through each chapter. And so this is kind of like the timing of this was so good because it's still going to be somewhat fresh in our minds because we just read it. I mean, I know we're going to read a whole lot even before in a month from now, but just to know that it's still kind of fresh in our minds and to have this and to see this story of redemption, and once again just being such a picture of the gospel. Like I just don't even know what other way to explain it. Like that's exactly what this is. This is good news to God's people. Like that's exactly what the book of Ruth is.
Amen.
And I even I kind of wrote down, so sometimes when I'm going through like a chapter, I'll make these like charts where it's kind of like a 1-page snapshot of everything. And what I did was for each of the chapters, I kind of wrote like one sentence, a short statement that kind of almost represents it and how we're seeing like God in it. And so for chapter 1, I said, God allows suffering for those who distance themselves from him. Chapter 2, God rewards loyal servants in unlikely places. Chapter 3, God gives hope when all hope is lost. In chapter 4, God redeems the nations for his glory. Like these are all just like one sentence statements about each one. And then when I kind of put it all together, if I could put one sentence about the whole book, I just said that God turns messes into miracles to advance his kingdom. Like that's what it was, because it's been messy up until this point. And even with the family, it was messy in chapter 1. But by the grace of God, you have this Moabite woman, this foreigner coming in who has had to give up everything. And here she is just getting immeasurable favor. Like not just from God, but from the people. Like they're all just accepted. Like she's not being shunned by people. I mean, I know we don't get a full story of her life there, but from what we can see, she is very much being accepted, as if she's just one of their own. And that's just, I mean, that is a miracle considering all, especially during this is the time in Judges, because in Judges chapter 3, they warred against Moab.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's not like there wasn't no tension going on with these people. Like there was tension that was there, yet she is still getting favor from it. And it's a beautiful story. Even once again, going to see how God used a woman to be the focal point in this redemptive narrative. It's not the first time, ain't the last time, but it's definitely one of them. And how he used a woman to be a part of the redemptive narrative. And I think that there's too many times, especially in church, where it's like that gets suppressed as if like women don't have like any place. You know what I'm saying? It's just like you just be over there and just wait till I tell you to do something and that's it. And it's just like, I don't know about that because there's a whole lot of influence that we see in the Bible that if it wasn't for our ladies, like it'd be some stuff. And so I think that it's a good moment, especially as we're about to get, and especially now that we're going into First and Second Samuel and First and Second Kings, where you're going to see all of these male figures who are elevated to be kings over and over and over again. And it's like, okay, let's just remember this was the setup. This is gonna get everything in its place. And then yeah, so I know that's a little bit more, but I just wanted to just share that. I always like to see this. I'm trying to think of I have like a list of it, but like even just like a series on just like women in the Bible. Like that's just I just think that there's so much there that maybe we don't always get all the information, but when we look at all of the things that go around it, we see how it plays into it. I mean, I even shared on Easter, right? Like the testimony of the women, like how significant that is. And so I think it was just great to see that, to go through this book at this time. And I'm a fan, so I'm gonna leave it there. Especially up until this point, we all know women ain't got the best of the best of it just hasn't been always great. Let me say that. And
Right,
I know,
especially ending Judges.
yeah,
We
yeah,
we we needed a little
yeah,
authority.
Yeah,
yeah.
that was a rough
Woo!
ending of Judges.
I know
Woo!
it's been a rough one to get through, but
Can I ask a kind of a basic practical question? And you don't have to answer. I'm just curious. Is our church affiliated with any particular organization, denomination, religious order?
so I mean, we're technically a Baptist church. I mean, we are affiliated with us. I know. I mean, we are associated with it. It's mainly just because of some of the relationships that I've had with some other pastors that have grown
Yeah.
over time, as well as I mean, I think there's just been some resources we've been able to be able to provide to the church, and then some of the mission efforts I've been able to meet.
Uh-huh.
I haven't shared it just yet, but there's a church in Bryan College Station that's a church plant. They launched on the first week in March, and I met the pastor and his wife. Well, Antoinette and I both met them during our assessment time period, and now we get to support them as a church. And so there's been a lot of those different things that have happened. I think the funny thing is, and I'm just going to be fully transparent. When I first meet them and they ask, what kind of church are you? My response is always, we follow Jesus. Like that's the kind of church that we are. Because I don't want anything to be a divisive point for somebody because of some tradition or something else that has come in place that it's like, oh, I've had whatever the case may be. And from that, my question becomes, how about you come check us out and you tell me what you think we are? Because I think you would be very surprised if you come to our church. Because I'm sure there's a lot of Baptist pastors who will come to our church and they'll be like, "Oh, brother, I don't know about that. I don't know if y'all fully in over here."
Definitely
But to
not
me, I mean, I
natural.
think it's just like I don't want anything to be divisive
Yeah, yeah.
um, for us. So that's I know that's kind of like a long answer to your question, but I share
Actually,
that
that's not my question, really. Because you mentioned you gave this nice treatise on women and ministry and the role of women, the power of women, and how God uses them, and how some want to still keep them off to the side. I'm just wondering if we are affiliated with an organization, what their view is on women in ministry is what I really want to ask.
Well, I know that's been a point of contention, I think, within and I think this might kind of depend on because I mean, yes, there's a Baptist denomination, but I think there's different views within that. I mean, some of y'all have probably if you're in kind of church news, you might have heard about certain things, especially with like the Southern Baptist Convention, for example. Rick Warren was in the news about them having like a woman pastor and kind of like what does that mean and kind of like excluding certain churches or having them and this, that, and the third. And so that's kind of I mean, I think that's kind of like a little bit of a point of contention, I think, for me. Just because I'll be fully transparent with you. I've told my wife, when I got saved, I mean, it was a woman preaching that day. Like it was. And I can't negate what happened. I'm not saying that she is the reason I got saved, because clearly it's God who grants the increase. But that doesn't mean that God wasn't using her as a steward in order to reach me.
That's right.
And I got saved that day. So I think when it comes to like women in ministry, I know personally, like I've said this in a members class before, like I mean, I'm not saying I clearly it hasn't happened yet, but I would never say that there would never be a woman at our church that would be on the platform preaching like that. Like that's I would never say that wouldn't happen. What are the repercussions of that in the future? As far as like with the denomination stuff, I mean, we're probably too small now for anybody to care about us. But that's just kind of where I stand on that. And so I feel like if I'm engaging with another pastor or if it's, another church, whatever the case may be, and if, they're saying, hey, what is your stance on this? Like that's my stance. When I think of, we had Easter Sunday and, Mary Magdalene, right? Like there's always this contention of like, is she an like what is her role? Like, can you evangelize, but can you not preach? And it's just like, well, are we using semantics now? Because the word proclaim to you means something different than it means to me. Like proclaim is proclaim. Like that's just it is what it is. And so yeah, so that's kind of my long-winded answer of where that is. I think when it comes to any affiliation that we have, honestly, I'll cross that road when we get there. I don't think we don't have any issues right now. And if somebody were to come in and say if we did have some, as far as my conviction though, then I just might have to find somebody else to affiliate with because I just feel like that's just my stance on it. And I haven't had any issues as of yet, as far as we doing something out of order or something like that. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's God's church, so that's where I stand on that.
Well, thank you. Just curious, because it
Mhm.
sounds like you have a very open stance to women in ministry, which I think we should, because even as we've gone through Judges, we see how God raised. We'll see even more how God is raising up women, being key places and roles throughout the Scripture. Now, obviously, the Scripture is loaded with male presence, but God keeps peppering it and salt and peppering it with all these dynamic women, which shows us that God has a plan for them in His economy as well. So,
Mhm.
right on. Thanks. I was just curious.
No, I mean, I feel like that's very fitting considering, like I said, the Book of Ruth, what's happening there, and I mean, honestly, if you look in most churches and even including our church, I mean, we're still majority women. I think that we still have a good mix at our church. I think that we have more males at our church than maybe a lot of other ones do,
Yeah.
especially being active. But I
Mhm.
mean, so you come in at that hospitality hallway, it's about 10 ladies up in the hallway. Like
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
like you gonna be greeted and you're gonna be welcome and it's gonna be good. And I'm not saying that's by design, that's just how it's been. But yeah, so I'm all for it. Uh, that's my conviction on that. And like I said, I don't maybe that's just a personal leaning to me because of my salvation story. And maybe that's just where that conviction lies.
Yeah,
But yeah.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
but thank you for asking that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that's the type of question that I feel like comes up at like when we do like meet the pastor membership class, like that's the type of question that would come up essentially at that time.
Yeah.
So it gets asked one way or another, you know.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. Well, we
That's a
thank
great,
God for the witness that he's shown us in the book of Ruth. It's just really, really, really powerful, man. Really,
Mhm.
how it can take heartbreak and turn it, like you said, into a miracle. You said suffering into a miracle, because Naomi was just wiped out, losing her husband and her
She literally
son.
said she was empty.
Yeah, yeah. Mm. She never
yeah.
lost faith in her God.
Yeah, she said, I went out full, but the Lord has brought me back empty.
Hmm. Yeah. What did she say at the end, though?
Yeah, yeah. Any any last thoughts on today before we close out in the time of prayer?
The question our brother Drake brought up was a great one. In the two parts, and but as far as the women part, I've got a whole lot of insight on that, but not enough time to discuss it. But we'll just leave it at when Jesus said, "Your sons and your Peter, rather, your sons and your daughters shall prophesy." The word prophesy there is meant as the way Paul meant it in 1 Corinthians, the 14th chapter, when speaking about proclaiming the gospel of Jesus Christ and it's all of its forms, including comfort and exhortation and all of that. And then of course Mary Magdalene was the first one to bring the New Testament message. Go and tell my disciples that I have risen, which is of course the crux and the basis of our entire faith, that
Yeah,
he's alive. So, and then there's a whole lot more because when it gets into the scriptures of where Paul says to let your women be silent and there's a whole lot of culture behind that. There are cultural things
right,
behind
right.
those statements, which we don't have time to get into.
Yeah. And that's
So,
and that's and that's why I feel like for me, I think that once again, I think a lot of times it comes to this semantics thing. I mean, yeah, you're looking at like what does the original word, you know, Greek word or Hebrew word say and all sort of stuff like that. But I think when it comes down to it, I don't think that, I mean, even when you think about like, so a church like we think of it, right? Like when you come to harvest on a Sunday, like we don't even see really the first platform, if you will, until the book of Ezra. You know, like that's like the first time we see like he like stood on like a box and he
That's
was
right.
like talking
That's
to
right.
people.
That's right.
Even then, it was people in the audience who were orators basically repeating what he was saying. And then when we get into the New Testament, right? Now you're talking about Paul leading this missionary journeys and starting churches in different places. And once again, it's like it's not in what we are doing today. You know, like that's just become something that's just kind of grown over time. And so I think for me, it's a matter of I don't think that there is anything in scripture that is so definitive that is saying that this cannot be. That's all I'm saying. I have to go back to the text. And I don't think there's been anything, and that's why it's such a point of contention because everybody's interpreting it either one way or the other way. And it's just it ends up being a moot point because nobody's gonna win in that argument. Like at this point, it's a mystery of God, you know, if it's coming down to that. And it's just like let's not just be divisive over it because that's I think the issue is we just never want to be divisive. That's the heart of my wife and I is we never want to create an environment that causes division because that's the biggest enemy of the church is division. As soon as it starts being, you know, oh, it's these over here versus these over here, that's when it causes the issues. And we're just not trying to be about that. That's why I tell people like, hey, you hear me say we're all equal at the foot of the cross. The third Sunday we had at Braswell in August, I had another preacher come in. You know what I'm saying? It's just like you need to understand that we are a family. Like this is a collective thing. We all have different roles within that family dynamic. But that's just what it is. So I don't want to spend too. I know we kind of on time here, but thank you for the question. And you know, hopefully I didn't offend nobody up in here today. Any prayer requests for us to close out today?
Yes, pray for my husband, please, a health situation.
Okay.
Mhm. Yeah. I have a follow-up with my surgeon tomorrow, and I'm hoping they can tell me why I still feel a little lightheaded when I stand up and try and walk. I'm ready for that to be gone. So,
Mm-hmm.
Pray for my sister. She's in the hospital with some high blood pressure problems, and they really don't know what's causing it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Anybody else? Okay. Let me pray for us. Gracious Heavenly Father, thank you for just this time to gather to share what's on our minds and on our hearts as we continue to read your word verse by verse, line by line, and just truly seeing you in all of it. Your scripture truly is just revealing of who you are.
Mhm.
We are grateful that you have given it to us, even in this form. We know that um, uh, uh, in the old days that there were scrolls, or it was more of a in oral transmission of your word, and yet you've given it to us in so many different forms that were in translations that were able to truly reach so many people. But knowing that we have to start with ourselves, and so we're grateful, God, that we get this opportunity to read your word, as many do not have this same opportunity to do so. And so as we just continue on in this Bible reading plan and start in as we've just began a new book in First Samuel, it's truly a transitional moment as we've seen a king come into play, kings come into place, and then prophets will fall in line during this same time, as we'll see when we get into First and Second Kings, and even with the prophet Samuel. And so, Lord, just thank you for allowing us just the opportunity as we just continue with a few chapters a day. Even with the podcast from Tara Lee Cobble, we're gracious that she's given us not just a reading plan to follow, but also some commentary that she's done to due diligence and the research on many of these passages that have cut down our time of study. Not that we don't need to study, but it has cut down our time, knowing that she is a trustworthy resource. And so we're just grateful that she has created this platform for us to follow. There's so many other ways to read through the Bible in a year or in shorter periods of time or whatever that may be, but this is one that you have placed on our heart as a church to go through, and we're thankful for it. I just come to you now, Lord, and just for Mr. Hunt, just with his health right now, that he is just not his full self. He's not
Amen.
100% in the way that he is normally is, and so just praying for him. Knowing even Miss Hunt has come over through some health or recent health scare or complication, and just praying that her health has just been restored, and maybe she's still recovering in that, but just praying for healing for her, praying for healing for him as well. Know that, God, that you have a supernatural healing, something that we
Yes, God.
really cannot do on our own, and sometimes we
Yes,
can't
Lord.
comprehend,
Mm.
even to the point that the physicians and healthcare teams, when they see recovery, they just can't even explain what's happened because they've tried everything that they know.
Jesus.
But most importantly, that it's you who comes in and truly
Yes, God.
brings about the results and the resolution that we are
Mhm.
striving for. And so
Yes,
I'm
Lord.
just praying for the health for the Hunt family, for
Yes,
Mr.
Lord.
Hunt, for them just to be restored mentally,
Oh,
physically,
Jesus.
emotionally, even spiritually, if they're feeling drained.
Yes, God.
Naomi said, she said, I left full, but I'm coming back empty because of the Lord. And sometimes, God, you empty us for a reason to make us to draw closer to you. And so allow us to not forget that in these times. Praying for Mr. Drake and just his health right now, something that's been lingering as well. Praying that you can just restore him, that you can redeem whatever it is that's trying to take over on the inside, and even when he's standing up, that's causing some complications. That's even prevented him from doing some of the things that he just loves to do. I just pray that you can
Mhm.
heal him, Lord, that you can just
Yes.
remove this ailment that's trying to just weigh
Yes.
him down. No matter how big or how small it is, it's impeding different things that you have called him to do. And so I pray that you just can just heal his body. I pray that you're with his wife as Miss Drake, as she just continues to love and to care for him. That
Yes,
she's
Lord.
able to just be by his side as she always is, and just a joyous family that they are. And I hate to see the what he's going through right now, knowing there's so much joy that he's trying to get out, but sometimes it's just hard, Lord. So just heal him, Lord, from the top of
Thank
his
you,
head,
God.
bottom of his feet. Give him
Thank you, Jesus.
I know that joy is always there, but just to give that restoration in his health now, God, to bring him to a better place.
Hmm.
And also just praying for Aunt Joyce, just with her being in the hospital with blood pressure complications, Lord. Maybe not really sure what's going on. Maybe she's had some conditions with blood pressure before, but maybe
Jesus.
something is just happening now, Lord, that is just it's different than anything it's ever been that's causing her to go to the hospital. So
Yes.
we're praying that you're with the healthcare teams, that she is just in inpatient right now, that they are not only utilizing their gifts and talents, but truly giving you the glory in all of it. I pray that they can use this opportunity, just as Mary Magdalene did, to share and proclaim the good news to the disciples, that the healthcare team can use this time to continue to share the good news to Aunt Joyce. And it's not
Yes.
that she doesn't know you, Lord, but just that they are
Jesus.
so overjoyed that they want to share it with
Jesus.
any and everyone, believers and non-believers alike.
Yes.
So I just pray for them. I pray for her, just for her health to be restored. Praying as she is just in the hospital, that she knows that she's not alone. That Mama can be there for her. That she has children that can be there for her. And just care for her. So just heal her, Lord.
Yes, God.
Give her body some peace in whatever
Yes.
pain she might be feeling right now.
Yes.
Allow her just to feel your presence above all, so that she can be fully restored and healthy back to where she was.
Hmm.
And Lord, I just lastly just want to just pray for our church
Yes, Jesus.
ministries. We're still a new church. I mean, I know we're some months in now, but we're still new. And
Yes.
I'm just grateful for all of the stories that we have heard so far of people just feeling just so welcome, so loved. That they just feel your presence permeating all throughout the service and in the school when they come there.
Thank
And
you.
we just pray that that same feeling just continues to distribute throughout the school, throughout the week.
Yes, Jesus.
Lord, we just pray for an overflow, and that we're
Yes.
not here to be divisive. We're not here to pit one, denomination or tradition or something over the other, but that we are truly just following you. That you are the priority, you are the focal point,
Mm.
you are any and everything to everyone. And we want to continue to just be good stewards over the resource that you have entrusted to us, that we know that we have a responsibility to be these good stewards, and an accountability to each other, and that we live that out. Knowing that our reward one day will truly be in heaven. It's not that you don't reward us here on earth, but we know our ultimate reward is not here in the perishable things, but it is in the imperishable world to come. And so, Lord, just praying for our church, especially for this year. There's so many things that are happening this year that can cause division even beyond the church. We just pray that we can be a church that just continues to love each other, continue to support
Yes,
each other.
God. Yes, God.
Even if we have differences, we're never all going to agree on everything, but we pray that we can agree enough in that we follow you, and that you are that you are our shining light, that you are our counselor, our comforter, or everything that we need, God, that we need to follow. So thank you, Jesus, just for being the example to us as we just continue to read your word, even in the Old Testament, how we see you in all things through Samson, through Boaz, through Moses. So many times we see you there, and we just can't wait until we get to the Gospels to see you in the flesh come to earth. So, Lord, we are grateful for this time. Thank you for everyone who's able to join on this Bible study today, and just praying they all have a blessed rest of their week. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
So
Thank
when we
you,
come
God.
back
Amen.
together next week, it'll be First Samuel, chapters 1 through 27. And there are some Psalms kind of sprinkled in throughout this next week as well. But it will be mainly just kind of one book. We have to understand that a lot of the Psalms are written during times that we're going through. And since we're reading the Bible in a chronological order, we're reading these things as they happen. And so the Psalms that we are reading are with the times that we're reading now. So if you're wondering why that's there, that's why that's there. But we 1 Samuel chapters 1 through 27, and definitely looking forward to it. So thank y'all. Y'all have a blessed evening, and we'll see y'all soon.
Not on. Rest well.
Bye.
All right.